We're live.
Good evening, everyone. This is the meeting of the Academic Standards Committee. Today is November 9th, 2017. If we could all go around the room and introduce ourselves. I am Kyle McKessie. I am a member of the Council Rock School Board.
Matt Frederickson, IT Director.
Ed Tate, School Board. Jerry Grubb, School Board.
Sue Elliott, Assistant Superintendent.
Barry Desko, Director of K-12 Education.
Chuck Lambert, Director of Special Services.
Andy Block, School Board.
Bob Hickey, Richborough.
Kathleen Holland, School Board.
Dr.
All
Elliott.
right, we have two agenda items this evening. Both are at this, the first one is a discussion item. The second one will be a board action item, but not at the next board meeting, probably either the December or the January board meeting. So first up, we have a presentation tonight by Dr. Charles Lambert on sleep and school start time. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Lambert.
So I'm going to talk about sleep, please stay awake, and school start time.
You look really serious tonight.
Well, I said, they said you want to sit down. I said I need the pace or
Are you Were you up too early this morning?
Yes, I was. Just to tell you a little bit about how at least how I got here. Last spring, there was probably some conversation from some board members, I'm not really sure I wasn't part of it, about should we have someone attend this conference because it's an important issue. And Dr. Fraser had said to Barry, perhaps you would go to this conference, anybody else? And my good friend Barry said, no, I think Chuck would be much better as an attendee at this conference. So Andy Rowe.
You can go together?
No. Andy Rowe, our Director of Transportation, and I went down to the conference. And I'll admit, I was not excited about it. It's not an area of interest of mine. It's not something I really pay much attention to. But, you know, I was called to duty and off I went. I will say to you that it was 2 days of presentations from medical professionals, psychologists, business people, politicians, school administrators, school board members on various aspects of how sleep affects adolescents. And I would say within 2 hours, I was convinced. I was like, I don't even have to stay here anymore. This is, in my opinion, a no-brainer worthy of consideration at minimum. So it was very, very compelling, everything they were saying. I will admit, at the time, my two older sons had moved out of the house, but I still had an 18-year-old daughter living in my house. And those of you that have teenagers or had teenagers, you know that feeling when you're down in the kitchen getting ready for work and you hear them come down the steps and it's like, I gotta run because I know what the mood's gonna be like. So I was kind of used to, you know, what it's like for teenagers getting up that early in the morning. So it was compelling stuff. What I'm gonna do with you is kind of just give you a summary of what I learned there. I'm not an expert by any means on a lot of these topics, but it was definitely very interesting stuff. I do want to say in this handout, all of the slides I either copied directly or very heavily borrowed from slides that were in the presentation. At the bottom of each of the slides, if appropriate, I noted the presenter that whose slide that came from. So the American Academy of Pediatrics urges middle and high schools to aim for start times that allow students to receive 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep a night. And in most cases, this will mean a school start time of 8:30 a.m. So I'm going to ask you, if you have a pen and pencil, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds a minute, nothing more than that. What are some of the obstacles that come to mind that we would have to deal with? What are some of the issues that we would have to address if we said we wanted to go in that direction? And I'm not going to make anybody read anything out loud, so feel free to write down your thoughts. So the reason I asked you to do that is, you know, as I was sitting through the conference, all the questions that would pop up, somebody would say, and this is how we dealt with that. I'm not going to be able to leave you tonight with a lot of details of how this should be done, because they didn't give us a lot of that information, because it just varies greatly by your community and what you have in place. But most of the things that people would come up with as concerns, things that might get in the way, have come up everywhere, and they have all been dealt with and managed effectively. And I'll probably hit on some of the things that you wrote, and if I don't, bring them up later on, we can certainly talk about it. The sleep experts, I'm going to show you just a little bit of quick data on the physiology of sleep. And research has shown, as this slide shows us, that in the past, since the early part of the 1900s, adolescents, school-age students have lost about a little over a minute of sleep per night, per year. So if you look back in the early 1900s, it was typical for kids to be getting 9 hours of sleep, and you look at where we are now in terms of how much sleep students are on the average getting. This slide shows us that for students ages 16 to 18 years old, the number that are getting less than 5 hours of sleep is 3%, 5 hours 5%, 6 hours 10%, and so on and so on. You see that asterisks are there for age 18 because some of those 18-year-olds are in college, so you need to take that into consideration. But if you look at 8, the sleep experts saying 8 being the absolute minimum number of hours of sleep the students should be getting, 42% of students are getting less than that. If you think 8 as the minimum, if you include 8 hours of sleep, 69% of kids are getting the minimum or less of what is recommended in terms of sleep on a given night. What are some of the things that come into play here? Melatonin, you're familiar with melatonin, is the hormone that is responsible for sleep. They call it the hormone of darkness. It marks the brain's nighttime. It's the gate for sleep. It's what tells your body it's time to go to sleep. It's what tells your body when it's expired, it's time to wake up. If the literature is clear, in adolescence, the release of melatonin is about 2 hours later than what is expected, what we see in younger children and in adults. I don't recall when it shifts back to the earlier time. I recall it being sometime in the 20s. So for adolescents, that melatonin is coming into play 2 hours later. So if you're like me, when I'm listening to this the first 30 minutes that I was there, I'm thinking, just be a parent, tell your kid to go to bed earlier. They can't. Their melatonin production is not such that they're ready to go to bed at 8 o'clock at night, okay? So the melatonin is an important piece, and I can't explain this real well, but circadian rhythms are rhythms that occur on approximately a 24-hour cycle, and there are things that influence those, and those are again the things that tell us when to go to bed, when to wake up, when to eat. That's what our body's doing. So things that influence that, the sensitivity to light. And what happens here is the brain waves that we see, the melatonin production, the circadian rhythms for teenagers are all such that going to bed earlier is not really successful for them, and why they need the late sleep. So for teenagers, they favor late nights because their body's telling them that, and they favor it by correlation. They then favor late mornings as well. If you ever took any psychology courses, you remember Rem Sleep. If you hear about that, which is your rapid eye movement sleep. That's the deep sleep that your body goes into. Your body needs that for biological health. It affects many, many, many things in how your body functions. When you look at this slide here, what it's saying to it is at 8 hours, okay, you're effectively cutting out 1 to 3 hours, 1 to 3 REM cycles if a student is not getting the full 8 hours of sleep that they should be getting. So that you're now having an impact on how their body functions because they're not getting that very important REM sleep. So what the research has found, when you have students that are getting the appropriate amount of sleep that they should, there's improved attendance, there's improved academic performance, there's a decrease in car crashes. That's the one that had me from right away. There was a significant decrease in car crashes in schools that have changed over. fewer risky behaviors like fighting, tobacco, alcohol, and other drug use, sexual behavior, less likelihood of considering suicide, less likelihood of obesity, fewer athletic injuries, and improvement in cognitive functioning. And this kind of just summarizes what that says. You'll see a lot of this is the Minnesota sleep study. Pretty much the state of Minnesota is on board with making this.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just remember one of the first big studies I heard about was Minneapolis, St. Paul. They did a big multi-year study in that metropolitan area. Did they talk about that?
Yes, the Minnesota Sleep Society was very well represented there.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, I don't want to say all the schools in Minnesota, because I don't know that, but much of Minnesota is on board.
It's north and dark and cold.
Yeah.
Adolescent sleep biology. The main point is the bioregulatory factors, sleep and wake homeostasis and circadian biology, both favor delay in the timing of sleep as adolescence progresses. If you look at all of the things that go into those circadian rhythms, the metabolic release of hormones, the sensitivity to light, all of the physiology involved, if they graph it, it's in waves. And in adolescence, those waves are greatly reduced. Okay, so there's that period of time when those waves are. So all of that is what is telling your body, this is how much sleep you need, and this is when that sleep needs to happen. The bottom line is too little sleep for school days. They don't get enough sleep on school days, and they have what's called social jet lag. Social jet lag is what most of us do when we don't get enough sleep. We think, I'll catch up on the weekend. Your kid comes home from school and goes right to sleep because they're going to catch up on that sleep. It doesn't provide what the body needs by doing that.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Please.
I'm sorry. Did any of this study have anything to do with distraction, or it was simply, I'm sorry, not this study, the work that you've done here? Did it have anything to do with distraction, or it is simply just a physiological impact of lack of sleep?
What do you mean by distraction?
If somebody's on Snapchat. I mean, the other reasons that kids might not be sleeping in addition to all of the physiological.
There is, maybe as you said, there's an aside to this. I recently went to a workshop presented by Catherine Dalsgaard. You may have heard of her. She does incredible work out at CHOP, a psychologist, on working with children with anxiety issues. Kraft had her in, she did one of the speakers. Outstanding, if you ever have a chance to hear her, she's wonderful. She has taken a keen interest in the effect of sleep or lack of sleep on children, and in her work, when she's working with adolescents, one of the things she always does is get them on a sleep program. They do diaries and they study their sleep, and she gets the kids to sleep better. She has found that the intensity of any symptomatology they have decreases greatly when you're on a good sleep schedule. So she talks a lot about what are the things that we need to do to help kids have a better sleep schedule, aside from when it happens. Clearly recommends screens. There's a word they use for, I forget, the blue light that comes off of the screen. So anything with technology like Snapchat should stop 2 hours before children go to sleep. She also talks about, and I wish I had known this all the years ago, my daughter would, I hope she's not, I know she's not listening, but my daughter, my daughter would come home from school, and my wife and I would try to not take it personally, but she'd go right upstairs to her room. She would do her homework in bed. She would watch, shows on the computer in her bed, talk to her friends in bed. I used to sometimes think, how can you spend so much time in that bed? She talks about you should never spend more than 20 minutes in your bed not asleep. If you wake up, I have problems waking up in the middle of the night. After 20 minutes, if you're not back asleep, get up. Don't go do something, but just go someplace else, because you want your body conditioned to this bed means I'm sleeping. But in terms of the distraction, a big part of that was the computer screens and televisions all should be off 2 hours in advance. And that does have some implications for us as educators, because we are now more and more increasing what we expect kids to do with technology in terms of their homework. And if they're up late, not sleeping because they should be asleep, and they're up doing their homework late at night in their bed with that screen on, it's not helping them get to a better night's sleep.
Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting.
So, as I said, the thing about car accidents really hit me. There was a survey that was done. Brian Teff was out from AAA. One of the questions was, have you ever driven when you were so sleepy you had a hard time keeping your eyes open in the past 30 days? I'm sure, I know I've had that experience. It's very frightening when you realize I'm having a hard time keeping my eyes open. And so you imagine that with a teenager. Licensed drivers aged 16 to 18, 23% responded at least once in the past 30 days they've had that sensation, and 2% responded it happens to them fairly often or regularly. Mortality from car crashes decreases by about 16.5% by an hour delay in the school start time. That was from the Rand Corporation that did a lot of the research that was involved there. Best estimates suggest that drowsiness back to AAA, 4% of all teen drivers crash. They believe the drowsiness is a factor in 4% of all teen driver crashes, 7% of teen injury crashes, and 13% of teen fatal crashes. And I think that this importance there is the seriousness of the accident increases due to the drowsiness. Any questions about any of that? Please do it.
What was that on the prior slide? What was the percentage? 16% mortality? Yeah, 16 point. Thank you.
And there were, as I said, there were folks from the school districts, administrators, school board members, politicians, and they shared a lot of anecdotal information to support that. Every hour of sleep increases the probability of finishing high school or attending college by about 13% or 9% respectively. Excuse me. Again, out of the Rand Corporation, their research typically is economically based, so it's a different type of research than I'm used to, but that's what they came up with. Sleep and school start time legislation has been introduced in 11 states in the U.S. You can see it was at one point in time introduced in Pennsylvania, where you see the asterisks. There is legislation that has been enacted. Now, what that says, I don't know. The legislation might be we are requiring school districts to consider this. I don't know exactly what it is. If you look at New Jersey, there was an article in the paper today, Burlington County schools are making a shift. In terms of around here, I'm only aware of one school district in Chester County that has made a shift. I don't know of any others that have moved in that direction. You need to go check scores. It's either that or not. All of these professional organizations, and there's many more, but this is an example of professional organizations that have come out with statements in support of shifting school start times. This is just an example from one of the school districts of how when they made the shift, how times compare. And I'm not going to read it to you, can kind of take a look at it, but I think, to me, one of the important things was both of them ended up with dinner with the family still being at 6:30, and the nighttime homework still being in that same time.
Let's say sports practice though, right?
I'm sorry?
We'll come back to it when we talk about sports practice versus sports competition.
Okay. This is not scientific. Fairfax Public Schools of Virginia, about 189,000 students, they have moved to this change. When you look at what some schools have done, your automatic conclusion is that you're going to switch high school start, and elementary school start earlier, high school start later. Kids at a younger age are able to get up earlier. I know my kids all through elementary school were up at 6:30 watching Sports Center or whatever it was. So I think younger kids are able to get up earlier and function. But not all schools do that. Some schools just add additional transportation runs into their schedule. Again, it depends on the size of the school district. But I only put this up there, and this where it says ratio to Council Rock, that's just a Chuck Lambert made up thing. There's nothing scientific about it. But if you take our 11,000 students in ratio to $189,000, they added 73 buses. It would be approximately 4-point-something buses. I don't know if that would actually play out in reality, but just like the sense that it might not be a huge amount of busing, but depending on how we decided to do.
Well, the other thing you have to keep in mind, we don't know about, maybe you do, but if our buses run 3 separate runs for each age group in a rural or a more rural environment, they don't do that split. So it is the bus that runs, so you can vary the start time. It takes every kid, it gets to the stop, you know, if your bus is covering 50 miles, it picks up every kid on that bus and drives 50 miles, high school, elementary, and middle, you know, and middle school. So it scales differently because we reuse and repurpose buses during the day. That's why we get a little bit of a lock-in on some things, historically.
Which a lot of them have that, this is just me, but there's nothing necessarily accurate that. But many of the school districts that have done it are not rural schools, but big inner city schools. A lot of school districts in California have done this. Young students are better able to move their bedtime forward, I mentioned that. So if you were to just, that did point into this, make this change, what had to happen. They all suggested you would have an advisory task force to look at it. You need to have a very clear communication plan so that everybody knows exactly what's being contemplated. You need to identify and address the issues. They were very clear that the issues will vary from school district to school district based on your size, based on your community, based on your priorities. Do a lot of homework, develop a plan, present the plan, gather feedback, and make modifications if necessary. Have your decision makers make their decision, and then you go to make a decision to either go or not to go with it. You need to make sure that task force has plenty of time to do its work. Typically takes about a year for them to do that work in the districts that were there. If you're going to make it, you want to have this information no later than early fall so that you can make a decision by the end of December in order to move forward for the following school year. I don't think that's kind of surprising to any of us about how you want to go about making change. Issues that needed to be addressed, they all can be overcome. The idea of change, the idea of change and its impact on individuals, you have to always look at change process. Start times for other school districts, what are your busing schedules, staff resistance to work day, schedule change, athletics and extracurriculars. 0-hour issues is some districts would try to do something where the school start time would stay the same, but you would be allowed permission to not come in for the first period, not be required. So if you had some kids that wanted extra stuff in their schedule for whatever. I'm not really sure why, but that was a big topic for a lot of school districts. Concerns about daycare for younger siblings or high school students taking care of the little guys when they get home from school. High school students being able to work after school, and clearly the financial implications, because there's likely to be some.
Nothing about childcare or sports specifically?
Daycare for younger siblings, that's what that was
athletics
talking
and
about.
extracurricular.
And then athletics. So those are some of the issues that they felt were pretty typical things that came up that needed to be addressed.
Chuck, next question.
Yep.
Maybe because Jerry said it, I started thinking about it differently, but did any of the schools start their schools at the same time? In other words, middle school and high school starts at the same time.
Yeah. Especially some of the smaller school districts would do that kind of thing.
So instead, if you move the high school back a half hour, just everybody starts at 8:10 here, just for example, I'm saying. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as high school goes at 9, elementary school now goes at 7:30.
Correct.
Which would be flopping those two.
Right. I know the article that was in the paper today about Burlington County, I think that they're starting at 8:10. They went from 7:30 to 8:10.
But that's for all intents and purposes, middle school starts at 8:05.
I grew up in Pennsylvania in a school district that didn't bus, so all schools started at 8:20 because there was no bus, wasn't there?
I don't know, in the other presentations in all my time, but it never occurred to me to start all schools at the same time.
But you had a lot of buses, so.
Yeah, I've heard that that's.
But middle and high school,
Yeah, I've heard that's a consideration for a number of districts. And, you know, transportation cost is one issue. The other issue is the shortage of bus drivers. You know, that's a big challenge to begin with.
yeah, the damn high school buses are empty now, I'm
Yeah.
just saying, I didn't know
Yeah.
it was a possible solution, I'd never thought about it, so.
Yeah, you can, I mean, I know where in my district, they did, I don't know if they're still doing, they did travel in middle schools, they would just drop the middle school kids off, same bus, go and drop the high school.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
That's what they do at Central Bucks.
I
Middle school,
don't
high school
know.
starts.
In Central Bucks they do? That's a huge.
That Central Bucks does it with Lennon B and West, because they're so close to each other.
Right, well, all the middle schools and high schools start at the same time.
in the
Well,
district.
middle schools start at 8, 8:30, high schools start at 8:25.
Right, because the bus doesn't go from one school.
And are they on the same buses?
Yes, although they drop, actually, I'm not sure for all of them, but Lenape and West do share the buses. I'm not sure if the other pairs share the buses, but oddly enough, they drop off middle school first and then go to West, I believe, even though the times are.
Oh, that's funny, yeah, it's the other way around.
Because they don't
Okay, just a
hang-
new thought.
hang around.
I had always thought of the complete, like, we'd have to flip it completely, it never occurred to me to.
There's a lot of districts that did not flip it. And when you talk about needing, Mr. Tate talked about the availability of drivers. The Fairfax County district, they did talk about that. That was an issue about how would they make sure they had enough drivers available for it. I'm not going to show this unless you want to. It's about a 12-minute video from one of the presenters who's much better spoken than I am. But it kind of just says what I just said in a nicer.
You had, you had me up a little.
We're good with you, Chuck.
Okay.
We like
Well,
it.
and I put it there because anybody's interested. It's in the handout. You can certainly take a look at it. And then the last thing I have, I'll just pass this out just so you have, I always think it's good for people to go home with something. Just the executive,
We have a homework.
no, just some of the things that,
You missed the writing down stuff.
from the Minnesota Sleep
I
Society.
missed the quiz, am I gonna get a bad grade? I'm not gonna go through it.
So, yeah, and if you want to discuss or ask questions, I'm not an expert, but I can, I'll try to answer what I can answer. More than that.
This is great. I should say, having raised that issue with the bus drivers and the transportation costs and so forth, I think there's
Okay, my friend?
a hugely compelling case for doing everything possible to adjust the high school start time. I mean, kids dying in car wrecks and all the way to their health, to their emotional health, to suicide. I mean, set aside academic performance. I think it's a critical issue.
You know, the funny thing for me, and this is completely like just weird one-off thing. So my daughter did home, what's the online classes? And she needs 10 hours sleep. And so she didn't have to go to school till 8:30, and it whacked her out. That was just her senior year. She'd been in high school for 3 years. But it didn't, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be great. She gets to sleep in so much later, and it did not have the effect. Now, one class your senior year is not a study for anybody, but I was just, that's when I started like, oh, maybe this is good. Certainly studies say it is, but
You know,
it didn't have the impact I thought it would.
in the school district I came from, we had one of the ways this also worked with athletics was interesting, which was so many of the people who participated in the varsity athletics, actually their phys ed course was all scheduled as the last period of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that worked was because it counted as their phys ed counted as their coaching time. And if they had a game that was right after school,
Right.
it was related to their classwork of their activity. So while it wasn't everybody, I never took gym the last period, for obvious reasons. But because I was never good at sport. But what it did was it kind of leveled that out. It kind of leveled that out, so you knew how that worked. So there are, as you look at what the objective is, you can look at what you can layer into it as well. It's not all, start time is great, but what can you layer into it for, achieving those same goals? Our school actually, if you completed your courses, you could leave at 2:20 in the afternoon. So all sorts of variations. I think there are a lot of, I don't think, my slightly long discourse is just, it's not all, moving the start time solves it all. I think there are knock-on things, including meals, which is, I think that our meal times in the schools are kind of crazy. Some of the schools where you eat it, lunch is at 10:30. I mean, that's nuts. So I think there's a component there that says, does that make sense? And is that because, and I'll shut up after this, which is, so if you eat at 10:30, you're digesting it, when do you hit that sleep wall, that that says your blood is not going to your digestive system and you're down.
Exactly. That was-
So, first a statement, I'm massively supportive of moving our start times later. I think that's the right thing to do. The evidence would seem to support that there. If we were going to consider doing that, would it make sense, and I'm not suggesting we should either way, but I know there's been some discussion, or suggestion at least, that we move to block scheduling, or other districts that are doing that. Would those two things, if we really wanted to move late, make sense to implement together, or are there benefits to our current system versus that a later start time would be better for? Just out of curiosity. I don't know if maybe they're mutually exclusive, but.
I don't think that, yeah, they don't really go hand in hand necessarily. And I think that, the data on different high school schedules, block scheduling versus traditional scheduling, which our model is sort of like traditional scheduling, but not completely like traditional scheduling because our class periods are longer. There's evidence on both sides to support both ways of scheduling. So they wouldn't necessarily have to go hand in hand. I think the challenge with this is all of the things that Chuck kind of shared, especially in in a county system where you're with athletics and with and I don't know if you mentioned up there, I'm not sure, like MBIT is another example of how if our start time is different from the other schools that feed into MBIT, what are the implications of that for our students who want to go to MBIT with scheduling? So that's why engaging in that conversation from a single district perspective and thinking about what would be the implications of all the other factors and things that we may not be able to control, but we have to think about how would we answer that question.
So it's a broad.
Does go to MBIT?
Yes.
Yes,
So-
and Centennial, right? Those.
So they work it out.
So is the broad range of districts in Lower Bucks County on the same general time schedule with regards to high school start times?
Yeah, I think for the most part, CV's probably the latest, I would think, for high school. That I'm aware of.
What time is that?
What do you guys
It's
think?
8:30, she said. What time's our high school start?
No, what do you think? Do you think this said put a task force together. What comes to mind is not only put a local task force, but maybe we get the IU involved and put a Lower Bucks task force together and spearhead it.
I was gonna ask.
We did do the
if we
study
have-
last
The
year.
IU did their study,
Right.
so what did their study show?
I'm not privileged, I don't know what their study showed. As Sue had said, when I had talked before, is I believe you really do need to look at it on a larger than us level because of the MBIT, because of sports and athletics. We also transport to a lot of non-public schools, so you have St. Andrew starting at one time and we're starting at a different time. So I believe other districts, my senses are where we are. We're at an awareness level. We're becoming aware of it, and we need to decide whether we want to take action and then what that should look like. I know that Robert said there has been conversation at the superintendent's meetings about this. I just don't know what that is.
I can speak to they did the 3-part study, and it is public. I could share that with you. I have all 3 of those documents. And speaking about the MBIT, Unionsville Chad 4 just recently moved to healthier school start time. They didn't quite make the 8:30 mark, but they did move.
They started at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, right, and that was one of their obstacles. And the way they got around it was the devil was sort of in the details. They found that there was like downtime, the kids would arrive at school and then they would wait 15 minutes before they got to the VOTEC school. And then like the first activity that they would have them do was do some journaling. And so they were actually able to move the journaling to a different part of the day. And it was just like a very detail-oriented things that they tweaked so that they would arrive later than the other students that were filtering into the same VOTEC school, but they wouldn't really miss anything. And my contact at Unionsville Chadford was saying that the tech schools are used to dealing with differences in scheduling, because different schools have, different districts have days off, and that they tend to be flexible and work with people. So that's what they did and how they got around it.
And at this conference, there was, I was sitting at a table with folks from Arizona, Washington, there were people from Singapore there. I think it's going to become, I think you're going to start to see it happening across the nation, personally.
So, real simple, go ahead.
Sorry, you're talking first.
So I look around, I haven't heard anyone speak against it. So I would tend to think that you have, the lane is ahead of you, but the question I have is, what do you want to do? Do you want to come to us with a work plan in terms of what you think you want to do to achieve this, and some projected, what inputs you want, and, it's great, your exercise, about writing down the things, I'm sure there's no untrod ground here. So do you want to put together a work plan that talks about it? And
I don't know that asking, I could be overstepping, I don't know that asking Chuck that
not
question.
shocking, it's the, and I'm saying,
But so then I think that comes back to us, right? So do we want to have a conversation with Robert and say, this, we're interested, where do we as a district move forward with this, or what's the next best step? I feel like Chuck just went to the conference and is reporting.
I'm speaking, when I say you, I meant the administration.
I think the IU's already done some work around this, right? And if it makes sense.
I will say, having sat on the outside, but loosely on a group of this that looked at it before that, letting me with the athletic children, I know that athletics is an enormous issue. I think if we could look at 8-10, now you've got only half an hour, you have a much better opportunity. But then if you're talking about completely flopping elementary, it was a few years back, so I'm not gonna tell you, and I can't say all the details from it, but it was a significant roadblock.
Yeah, I'm talking about the work though. I mean, I would just, when I hear,
Well, that's what I'm
give the
saying.
administration something else to do. If there's a body, if this is going to involve potentially to be successful, more schools, we've got a resource in the IU. It might be worth talking to Robert about, do you support this? And if you do you think it makes most sense for you and your peers to work through the IU, or us and our peers to work through the IU, to do a lot of the groundwork that'll answer some of these questions collectively? And then, maybe we need a concurrent group within Council Robert.
Well, that's why I'm
Figure that out
really
for us,
interested
because I don't know
in
if it
moving-
makes more sense to flip or do them at the same time.
I'm only interested in moving the high school back a half hour.
Right, but that's just your gut right now. I mean, for the people who, who are looking at the big, because I'm with you, my gut would say do them all at the same time too.
For me,
And so
I don't know
there's
what,
details.
I don't know what to do. I don't want to be so prescriptive.
Right,
My issue right now is this administration already has a redistricting to work on. They've got a bunch of tasks in front of them. So all I'm saying is, if they want to, if they got a whole bunch of tasks now, and do they want to say, well, look, if you want us to do this simultaneously, so it may take 1.5 years, 2 years, because they've got enough stuff on their plate now. But I think the board has said, yeah, it's worth doing. Let them look at it. And you know what? Truthfully, and I'll hear arguments about this, we can go with a 30 or 40% solution the first year that gets a lot of the, that takes some high marks off the thing, clears the rough spots, and then, the high points, and then we'll refine it as we go. We may find, truthfully, you may find that, the two high schools don't have to start at the same moment. And there are reasons you might not want them to start at the same moment, because you could then use the buses and do a south transportation set and a north transportation set, which use your buses, rather have all the buses running everywhere. You populate the south end and you populate the north end. There are lots of alternatives.
That was one of the things that Andy and I talked about, is that do we have to do our 3 separate runs based on level? Is it maybe geographic? way to look at it. There are some schools that because of the, I don't know if it's because of the athletics, and I'm not at all advocating that we shorten our school day, but they got that half an hour, then they cut a couple minutes off of each period, so now they got 50 minutes instead of just a half an hour. So,
Yeah, I'm not advocating.
nor am I, but my point is just when you listen to these people, they came up with a lot of very creative things that were helpful.
And it includes
I'm
labor.
We have to figure out where it's on our priority list, so the administration can figure out where it is on their priority list.
Or would we not go back to our superintendent and say, this is something the majority of the board feels is a priority, can you go back to your monthly superintendent's meeting and figure out how to have conversations to get everybody on board, so this does not become a task for just Council Rock, but it's important.
And again, it mitigates some of
Everybody's gotta have
the
fun.
workload.
Yeah, I think,
And the IUs, I mean, isn't that why they created it?
yeah, I know that the superintendents have discussed it at the IU, and I'm willing to bet that another district's gonna move forward faster than we are, and we'll learn from what others are doing. And I think, to Kyle's point, this conversation is very productive in the sense that we've got a consensus. I mean, not every board member is here tonight, but as Jerry pointed out, no one's spoken against it, so it's clearly a priority.
No, I didn't say it was a priority.
No,
We have
you didn't
agreement.
say that. Jerry noted that no one has spoken against it.
It's not necessarily a priority, it's a good thing, but we haven't said it's a priority, because we haven't laid it against the other things that we're doing.
Right, which is why I'm saying, that Robert is not here. Let's at least find out what that looks like and how we can engage the support and the resources of other districts to band together and the IU to work together, so.
And when I said that other districts, and this is an assumption, in this area, or we are in terms of it being at an awareness level, I did get the sense that there are other districts in this area that are further along that path than just awareness. It was just a gut feeling I had from the conversations I was having.
Let's find out, let's get on the bus, if the bus isn't moving fast enough.
So as you sat through this meeting, as you sat through these meetings, and you heard people talk about it, as you said, every problem's been put up, and what did you see as the three biggest things that other districts had to deal with in this? What was?
Transportation.
Transportation.
And I got the sense that for almost all the districts, don't quote me on that, there was some financial impact. How much financial impact are you willing to look at? It wasn't huge. It didn't seem to me that the immediate assumption is it's going to be a huge financial impact. I didn't get the sense it turned out to be as huge as most people thought it would be.
Right.
But you need to look at
But
it.
that, and traditionally that was an aspect of transportation. That financial impact and transportation were hand in glove.
And yet there was issues with, you're changing people's work schedules. But, teachers felt that the demeanor of the kids was so much improved. It was a positive thing. So I would say that transportation and athletics, I'm going to guess that every one of you wrote athletics and transportation on a piece of paper. Those are probably the two biggest things. The school districts that have done it, they said they did not have an issue with kids not being able to get after school jobs. Good. So
I
all
don't
of
think you'll
those-
have issues with athletics, you just have the kids who play them miss a lot more school time. I mean, so, it's not a problem, you just, games start at 3, the kids miss last period now, if you change it by a half hour, they're gonna miss last period and a half of second to last period. So it's not that it can't be done, but you gotta understand what all the unintended consequences.
Where you put up light, the outdoor sports, you can't put lights, there's another expense.
Well, sure.
I've also heard of other districts who basically just said, this is when our students are available for the games.
Yep.
And sort of set the standard, and then.
Let's be real.
I was shocked to hear how
Wouldn't be
ad hoc a lot of the scheduling is in athletics, whether it's just how they have to manage the space at North for the teams for practices, or coordinate with other schools to run games. I mean, the ADs are doing it on a game-by-game basis.
To Kyle's
It's
point,
crazy.
if you guys decide that you agree, we all think there's some work to do, I think some of the ADs should be on the committee. We're gonna have to tap into the 15 people that live in this building can't take on another project. So we're gonna have to pull from, but one of the ADs, the assistant super principals, we're gonna pull some people from there to sit on this and communicate with it.
You know, the other thing which was, and 2 points, one is, you'll have the police departments involved, because they're just gonna change traffic patterns in our communities. So they'll need to know. They don't want to say it, but they'll need to know, because it will change
Once the
traffic patterns.
decision's made, yeah, we'll have to
And
tell
the
a lot
other
of
thing-
people, but.
And to the point about getting a job after school, a lot of those jobs after school are because school is out and the kids are coming. So, you know, they're related.
So just so I'm clear on what the discussion is, I believe that one of our next steps here is to connect with Robert and talk a little bit more about what the conversation has been with the superintendents from the other districts in the IU, because I know the IU did the study with Hanover Research, but the superintendents had some conversations as a result of that. So finding out kind of where that is, and then based on that and you know, what our other priorities are at this moment in time, trying to think about what can we handle, what can we do.
Yeah, how would you guys like to go forward? How can we support you, or if it's more of a role for us and our leadership in the IU, how we do that? Or with other boards?
Chuck, I'll give you one thing you didn't know, or maybe you did. If you start school later, your chance of delayed opening and the safety is enhanced for when there's bad weather,
That's a good idea.
because the sun is up and the roads are warmer. So it's something which favors it, speaks in favor of it.
Yeah, and there is less bus traffic in the pre-dawn hours.
You don't have kids standing out in this dark space either.
And I don't have to worry about my son waking up early and waking me up.
Yeah.
For those of us who work.
It's all about you. It's all about you, Andy.
Those who work for a bus post.
Now it's a priority.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Chuck. I think
This
the,
one adds some color to the look.
one of the great takeaways from this is you went in thinking this wasn't,
Yeah.
a major issue, and now you're convinced.
I will say too that, like I said, within 2 hours, I was convinced, and I was also feeling embarrassed that I didn't know. I mean, this is so compelling. I'm thinking, how could I not be aware of this? And I pay attention to the literature of what's going on in education. It was that compelling.
You did a terrific job summarizing it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You got
4 slides that got us going right away, so well done, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Any other questions about this topic? Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our second topic for the evening, which is the proposed school calendar for the 2018-2019 school year. So Barry's going to talk a little bit about that.
So, hard to believe we're so early in the start of this year, and we're going to start looking at next year, but I think what we agreed to, that we thought it was wise to try to get a calendar out publicly and maybe get it approved earlier so we could plan accordingly. So this year is relatively less complex than last year, because last year, if you recall, we brought you a couple of examples and landed on this as what we thought would serve us best in terms of a general template. So it's pretty simple in terms of a start time because of where Labor Day falls. So Labor Day next year is on the 3rd, and as you probably remember, if it's in the 5th, 6th, or 7th, we try to start before Labor Day. If it's any other day, we would start later. So this would be an after Labor Day start. One of the things that you will notice is that in September, it's a pretty choppy start to the school year because we have 3 days off in the fall. So really what that typically does is partially responsible for determining our end date in June in terms of getting those numbers of days in. So that is a little bit different than this past year. The October is a pretty clean month. We just have our early dismissal K-12, so there's not much there. In November, we stay with what has been traditional. We close our schools during Election Day. And then in that week of the Thanksgiving holiday, we have our K-8 conferences, one of those having an evening set of conferences, and we alternate between elementary and middle school. And then it's an in-service day on the 21st. Go into December for your winter holiday, and you can just see where they fall. As we jump into January, we're closed for the Martin Luther King holiday, and then the 28th is really a day specific to the high school because that is day 90, so that is our semester break. It's an early dismissal for 9 to 12 only and gives the high schools a chance to wrap up those semester courses, do the final exams for those courses, do the grading, and then prepare for the next semester. February, again, traditional to what we've done is a professional development day on Friday the 15th before the President's holiday, and then closed on that Monday for the President's holiday. In March, we again have a pretty clean month with only the K-12 early dismissal day. April, again, staying with what has been traditional with our spring break. So the week off of that week in April, and you'll notice on the 15th and 16th, the Monday, Tuesday, those red lines indicate that what we did was before we would begin adding days beyond day 5, if we have a significant number of weather interruptions, that we would take those 2 days back, and then we would resort back to June again. And what that did was allow us to not push the calendar too late.
Where's Easter?
Easter would be the 21st. Yes. In May, again, pretty simple. You have a election day on the 20th. I'm sorry. Yep.
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Would it not make more sense to make the 22nd and the 23rd the days off? Because people go to visit people on Easter. And, it's Easter Sunday. It's not my family, but it's Easter Sunday. You have dinner and you rush home. I mean, how do you?
Years ago, we had Easter Monday. Everybody's done away with it. It's been like this for 15 or
Everybody
20 years. I feel like the world
Everybody
is
takes their
just.
vacations for the week. I mean, I've heard people complain about it. Don't get me wrong, we get feedback every year from a few folks who want to take that.
I don't
At
think
least
they
they want
want-
that day.
They
but-
want the Monday, but they don't want to give up.
No, they don't want to give up the whole week.
Well, but that's what, so, okay, I thought I'd ask, because it just seems.
With that week, you get 2 weekends out of it. So for families, it does give a long
Right.
break.
Okay.
So if you break that up at all, you lose
It's
that.
discontinuous time.
Yeah.
All right, I got you. I was just trying to think about people traveling.
Think too, if you want,
What?
if you want to keep your kid out Easter Monday, keep your kid out Easter Monday.
It's not a high priority to me, mind you, but yeah, I understand.
I'm just saying, sometimes I think we get stuck in the, if a family has an extended vacation, we've built that in. If their day is Easter Monday, that's their day.
And I think historically, if you remember, we started with the winter break. That week off was in February, I think it was. And then we only had off Thursday, Friday, and Monday over that Easter block. And then we kind of married those two and took a week. That's the kind of history of it.
No problem.
So in May, you look, there's just again, relatively clean month. We have the election day on the 21st, followed by Memorial Day on the 27th. And then with that calendar, you'll see that the last student day, which interestingly is always when it's a Friday, so that any interruptions to the schedule would bump us back to that week. So 5 days would take us into pushing to that last week of June. We'd be out on the 21st, but nicely because of, instead of adding a 6th day, we could jump up into that spring break before we'd have to extend into the last week of June. So that's kind of the advantage of moving back up into that April and picking those days back if we have a bad winter.
Just so I'm reading that right, so we're saying now with no school days will be done the 14th, no snow days will be done the 14th.
Students are done the 14th,
And
that's
if we
correct.
had snow days, we'd start the 17th to the 21st and then go back to the 15th, 16th.
Correct, and then back down to the 24th if we have to keep adding.
Right.
We've had at times 10 days. That seems to be the worst winters that we've had.
And then, where does that looming Penn State summer session was?
24th.
Probably.
I mean, I realize we
Right,
can't
yep.
build our calendar around that, but it's the week
Right.
after, 7
Seven,
days.
yeah.
7
You can't go
snow
back
days
any
before
farther.
that.
I think it's the 24th, that's what it's traditionally been.
Yeah, that was,
Unless
the
Penn
last
State
week of June
changes
is
their-
typically when
Okay.
Penn State summer.
Remind me,
session.
so if we have 5 snow days or less, how does that work?
We would take those days and extend from the 14th, which is the last student day.
The
and then-
first snow day
would be the 17th. We would add that day on the 17th. And the second day, we would add on to the 18th of June, then the 19th, 20, and 21. Before going to June 24th, we would go back up and take the 15th and the 16th
Right.
before dropping back down to the 24th.
And graduation stays on the final day of school, no
Final
matter
student
what happens with snow days.
Well, I wouldn't say no matter what happens. We could have some flexibility with determining that. What we're stuck with are two things. One is the 180 school day schedule
Yes.
and the 990 hours that high school students must have.
Right.
So when you fall short of those, then there is a potential penalty from PBE to the school district.
But you can apply for a waiver.
You can, but they would
They
not
never-
provide a waiver because you have the days. You know, if it were on June 28th and you didn't have it, you'd have to apply for it.
Yeah, so, what's the likelihood of graduation ever getting moved?
Pretty good.
Yeah, we usually don't announce graduation day till March.
April, yeah, March
Yeah,
or April board meeting.
Yeah, I guess the feedback in the past, even the discussion in the past, and Mike's not here, so I think it was him who was raising this more, is there a way to give people more notice? So I know we can't lock into one, but on this published calendar, would it make sense to highlight tentative graduation date, which would be the 13th, right?
14.
The 14th, that's Friday,
yeah,
maybe the last day of school.
Yep.
So then we
That
go
is-
like we did 2 years ago.
you cannot-
Early graduation.
you cannot find graduation date on our website.
No, it doesn't exist.
No, we haven't, and that was the discussion we had, is that we communicated late, so it gives people, it doesn't allow them as much time as they'd like to be able to plan for it, schedule it.
I just think that information ought to be on the website, some sort of explanation about graduation date.
Right. Just a
Well,
couple
this
questions.
is a change. We should work hard to. What's the change?
How,
The fact that the fact that we're now going to be starting to be, instead of our 3 days, depending on where Labor Day falls and all of
That's
that.
what we did last
Well,
year.
Early start.
That's what we did
I
last
might have
year.
missed it, we might have
I
presented
know
it this
it.
way last year, but
Yeah.
the calendars that kids in school had some really tough ones. They were always with 5 days, snow days included in them.
We had done, and we found it to be, I think, more confusing, is we built the 5 days in, and said if we don't use them, we started to back them
Yeah.
off.
yes,
Yeah,
So we said, well, that's kind of crazy, that you're already anticipating 5 days. So we said we would list the last day of school, day 180, and inform folks that we would begin adding them on immediately with each day. So
I
that
just
was
don't
one
think
of the
there's a
changes.
way that, there's no harm in communicating this
Yes.
ad nauseum.
yeah.
yes.
Because it's
No,
different.
right.
and it looks
Especially
different.
families that are graduating kid for the first time.
And then we got
Or
Susan
families-
this year, so she got.
It's actually, I think I'm more
Think it is?
concerned for parents who are graduating their 3rd or 4th kid.
Who think they know? I
Who
would have
think
looked
they've
at
got
the
the
schedule,
whole
I would have said,
Yeah.
oh, graduation will probably be the week of the 10th. To me, I would have assumed there's 5 days built into it.
Yeah, we'll just have to be very careful because what I don't want people to make an assumption is they see this date that's the tentative graduation
Yeah.
and then plan significantly
They're-
around that to
they're-
find out
I
that
would say
we change it.
the official graduation date will be announced in April. Come back and look for it. Due to potential snow days, we cannot announce, just tell them when to come back and look for it.
Right.
Yeah, find a color for that 18 to 21. Couple questions though, it'll be very, well, because I want them to look at it. I don't want them to look, it's good. I want them to look at that 18 to 21 and think, there's something going on there. What I wanted to ask you about, a couple things. I think I know the answer to all of them. We have no labor contracts that are up in the timeframe of this. Preston and Priya run through the whole duration of this contract.
No,
When are those contracts up?
well, Korea's up at the end of this summer.
Okay, so I just asked that question because the state law is that we have to complete education by June 30th. So we have to complete education by June 30th. If there's any labor dispute, we're bumping up against it. So I want to be aware of that. So I just want to put that as notice for the board, something we have to think about. Second thing is, what's our plan around new schools for that time? Are we opening any schools or anything in that time, or is that next
18,
year?
19?
Well, in the,
I'm asking the question. but I
date
think
up and you want to scroll up, Matt?
I'm asking questions, I think I know the answer.
So the opening of our keep going, please, thank you. The opening of
He's
our
leading
2
the
middle
witness.
schools and then the opening of Wrightstown at Richboro Middle School all happen on the 4th.
Okay, the reason I asked the question, well,
I'm with you 100%.
the reason I asked the question was 2002, we went to open a school that wasn't ready yet. And so we had to, you think that we're talking about early and late starts? Well, you have 26 kids who graduate, so you know this.
You don't.
But we started an early shift and a late shift. Barry, you laughed because you were a middle school guy at the time. So I want to be sensitive to that, that's something we have schools going on. I don't think it affects the calendar, but I want to be aware of it because one of the alternatives is if the school is coming up a little late, you may burn through those, you may decide as a district to take those snow days then and delay start a week if we have to, or 2 weeks.
We're not gonna be late.
We're not going to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob McCullough.
We are going to.
On time and under budget.
Yes.
I just, guys, if you don't have the conversation, you don't think about it. So that's all I'm saying is, I think it's the right schedule, but the flexibility that we have to be prepared and nimble around things that aren't where we expect them to be, when we expect them to be there. Because you're right, the other way, Newtown is an easy one. You stay in the building until it's done, and that's where you are. But Holland, I guess we're in that building too. So I just want to be aware of, what are we doing?
Yeah, and as we discussed, I think there needs to be some text on the website that explains how the calendar works. So I think it works well, it just needs to be explained. Yeah.
So we'll certainly add some, maybe we'll do the same thing we did on the April 15 and 16 dates, if you would, Matt, if you could scroll to the April month. So what if we take those short red lines and we'll include those in the June dates, so they're identified as that.
Great.
And then we'll put some actual notes that speak to graduation, being graduation is the last student day of school. According to this calendar, it's June 14th, however, and the official date will be set at the board meeting. We'll decide if it's the March or April board meeting, but we'll list that and say at that point in time, people can make their final plans. Could be helpful.
Yeah, the 21st is
Can you
actually.
just say April 1st? I mean, that's 2 months.
Yeah, we have to approve that graduation date at a board meeting.
No, I
So-
understand, but I
Right.
mean, whatever date, but can't we establish the date, right? That we're gonna approve it.
Once we're.
Yeah, so I said we could list the March board meeting, and just say
That's what I'm
that.
saying, so whether it's March, whether it's April, let's set a
Just
date.
pick the
If
date,
this
yes,
is to
we
be-
can do
This is the month or the.
So they know when to come back.
Yep.
Well, in truth, unless you think you're gonna get 2 snow days in April, in which case you grab them back right then, you can announce your snow day, as you said, the 1st of April. If you still had a snow, if it snowed on the 4th and 5th, you take it out the 15th and 16th.
So do you want him to color the 21st of March and add a category that says graduation date
No.
will be approved?
No,
on the
no, no, no,
21st?
no.
And just write it on the website.
Just the June dates.
Or
that
just
shows
do it
there.
no later than. Graduation will be, that date will be
June
approved no
30th.
later than
July
whatever the
4th.
date is. And then it's the same every year.
All right.
Yeah, we'll put something up to that. And I do want to remind folks that there will be, and Matt, I think you'll list this somewhere on the webpage. We'll put the calendar up there, and there is a calendar at crsd.org address that if people have questions or comments that they can send to us, and we'll monitor those and see if there are, and respond back accordingly. And then we'll plan to put this up either in the December or the January agenda to have it voted on.
Thank you.
Great.
Perfect.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask, has there been any consideration of like other religious holidays, for example, and like think about calendar? Because recently at my school, there's some students, for example, who celebrate Diwali, and they on that day they would miss school, but there have been some concerns like, is that really fair for those students to like because of their religion they have to miss school, whereas others wouldn't have to?
It's difficult because of the number of religious holidays that would fall in a particular calendar and the limited number that you could build into days off without extending the school year, and you have to finish by June 30th. That's been the difficult task in doing something like that. These have been what we've provided traditionally. What we do is try to make sure folks recognize that if they need to take a day off for religious observance, that there's no penalty for doing so. It's an excused absence and there's no academic penalty, their ability to make up the work and work with teachers to make up all that was missed. But it's probably the best that can be done under circumstances of recognizing how many different religious holidays there are. So it's a tough one, but it's just very difficult to be able to manage into a calendar.
Just thinking if there are any particular, like if there are more and more students like who have like like a particular religion, and maybe that would be like considering those particular holidays, perhaps. Like for example, like our district already, well, we have Paul Fun and like some Jewish holidays, since we have a high Jewish population, but a lot of other school districts don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But if the population of other like populations increase, would it like be like in considering, or like do we ever like keep track of like the changing population dynamics?
Well, we don't collect data on, religious backgrounds for families or students. We don't have that. We have ethnic, which is a requirement that we have to collect, but that's offered by the families when they do registration, but we don't do any collection of data on that, so we wouldn't even know. I mean, clearly, as you stated, that this calendar reflects the vast majority of our school community, which is why those particular religions are recognized.
Is the 19th of April Good Friday? Is that the deal with it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not, candidly, I grew up in a community where there was not a great Jewish population. It was a great Jewish population, it wasn't a lot of them. I heard myself say it. So, yeah, that school did not close. That school did not close for many years. It ultimately did, but that school did not close. But it also created, there were certain patterns that happened in the school that made teaching some courses more difficult than others in those years. So it's, I understand your point. It is a sliding scale in terms of, but this is our problem is that we live in a country. Virtue is that there is no state religion, but we have to acknowledge where the population bulk is.
Well, I think if you found yourself in a situation where any particular religious group was staying home on a day that we had school, and that we had a noticeable drop in attendance at the school to the point where it made sense.
That's what it was.
From a half the school stays home, you probably want to think about, do we give that day off?
Why wouldn't you consider the 17th then as a red day? Like Easter week really starts.
Oh, I see.
Oh,
What you mean.
Like April
17th.
17th, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I mean, if you're looking at it as far as Easter is concerned, I mean, really everything for Easter starts either Wednesday evening or on Holy
I
Thursday.
think we would go there next, right?
Well, no,
We
but
got that
part of what we have here is the 15th and 16th are official staff days. So it's not just a student calendar, but we have a contractual calendar with staff. So the 15th and 16th are in service days, so we can bring students in. But if we go to the 17th, we're adding a staff day, which means we'd have to take a staff day from somewhere else. So in other words, so we're balancing both calendars here, the contractual number of work days for staff, and then the number of 180 school days for students.
Well, no, I'm saying if you had an extra, if you had to have a makeup day.
Right, well, again, if it's a makeup day that you take to the 17th, you're adding a student and a staff day. The reason why we only took 15 and 16 was they were already staff days. In other words, because we also have staff that plan time off. So we've informed them that the 15th and 16th, if we have a difficult weather situation prior to that they need to be aware that they're expected to be at work. So in fairness to try to allow people to plan, the more of those you take, then you're saying now basically there is no holiday. You need to plan to be here all the way through. You're going to have Thursday and Friday off. So that's just the thinking behind it.
But that wasn't designed around Easter, correct?
What wasn't?
Those days, I think Bob is looking at those days as somehow tied to Easter, but because Easter changes every year in terms of where it is, those days are just where those days.
No, those days move.
They move with Easter.
They
The spring
Yeah.
break is always tied into the Easter.
Yeah.
Good Friday and Easter, yes.
We're not giving them out tax day. April 15th, you get tax day.
Yeah, it shifts.
That's the week you don't want to be at Disney World.
Right, then the reality is, I think we talked about this, we really got to pick a week and pull off primary election day and go to school that day if we wanted to, right? I mean, if we got really, yeah.
Schools can be open during the week.
Yeah,
Really
there's some
bad.
schools that are planning.
In fact, we used to always be open during the spring election day, because it was considered.
Because we get, well, did we get to this 2 years ago, where it got so bad we had to revote a new calendar to authorize some days, so we just go back first. And we have to vote
Of May.
Yeah, because it's late, because it's not.
The 21st of May is election day?
Yeah, that's weird.
I just want to make sure of that, because that moves around too. I mean,
It was always
It does move
second
around.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Well, I assume somebody checked on this Bucks County Board of Elections website.
Yeah, we had a.
for the primary.
Well,
Well, no, it isn't.
It is at 10:19.
In presidential years, they moved it and passed to try and
Yeah, it's been an.
It moves into
They
April,
moved.
very early for presidential elections.
They moved it
The
up.
April 26th one we had, I remember now.
Yeah, they moved it.
Yeah, the state wanted to be
I
more
remember,
relevant in the
Exactly.
election process, so they moved that primary up on presidential elections only, and that stay in May.
Yeah, May 21.
Well, I think,
Which is late.
I think there could be a lot of criticism of it, but it's not because it's an easy thing to do. So, thank you for putting it together.
Yeah. That's a lot easier, a lot easier to go through than it was last year.
Yeah, well, there's only one choice too. We got rid of the other options that we were looking at in the fall, so. So we'll listen to the calendar, monitor the calendar email and see if we get any comments or questions, and then we'll get it up for the board for approval.
Any other comment before we adjourn? Meeting adjourned, thank you.